Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I'm just going to wait for Zoom to pull everyone who's waiting in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. I have PowerPoint slides that I'm going to share in a minute. Welcome, Erica. Welcome, H. Sanders. I'm sure I'm saying, so that's like a first name, last name hybrid, but welcome. My video is doing something funny where I'm out of focus. So I'm gonna, oh, that's much better. Now you can see me. If you can see me and hear me, if you could just put something either in the Q&A or in the chat box or just say I can hear you. I wanna make sure you're able to hear me before I get started. Awesome, thank you, Erica, I appreciate it. All right. We will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar, How to Know When He's the One. I'm super excited for this one. This is a question. It's interesting. I haven't done this webinar before because typically I'm working with women who are at the early stages of dating after their divorce, they're getting back on the market. But I realized that this is actually a question that was keeping a lot of women from starting to date. Like they weren't starting to date because they weren't sure they would know when it was the one, when a man was the one. So I was like, oh, I should probably teach on that. So that's why that's the topic for today, is how to know when he's the one, so that when you do start dating, you can be super confident that you know what you're doing. So we're going to be on here for about an hour, maybe a little more than an hour, depending on how many questions we get. So we'll just see how it goes. The material is, I made it super tight. So you should be able to get everything definitely in less than an hour. I'm Shade Curry. I'll introduce myself in a minute, but basically I'm just going to introduce myself. We're going to do the teaching. I'll tell you a little bit about my program, and then we'll do some Q&A. I will stay on here for as long as needed to answer all of your questions, and we'll go from there. So my name is Heather, and I'm here with my sister Holly. Hi, Heather and Holly. Welcome, Tanya. It's good to see you again. All right, so a little bit about myself. Well, first of all, this masterclass is for you. If you are divorced, right, and you're kind of in midlife, I typically work with women in their late 30s and up, just because dating looks a little bit different for people in their 20s. So you're in midlife, you're a busy mom, you're a professional, entrepreneur, like basically you don't have a lot of time to like waste on dating games, right? So that's kind of who this is designed for, people who really want to be able to say, hey, I really know what I'm doing. I know kind of like I have like a beeline from where I am to where I want to be in looking for a long-term relationship. So you're looking for a long-term relationship, or you're looking for marriage. You're kind, loyal, giving. You would make a great partner for someone, right? But when you go online and you're dating, or when you meet people, it just seems to be like this very confusing game playing, people doing weird things. And you want to be able to tell when a man is right for you. You want to be able to tell when he's compatible with you, when he's reliable, honest, loving, etc. So if that's you, then this masterclass is 100% for you. Like I said, I'm Shade Curry. I am a certified life coach. I help divorced women date intelligently and get married again to a loving and emotionally healthy partner. So a little bit of my background, I got divorced from a 17-year marriage and went through my own healing, my own work. I worked with coaches to heal from the abuse and the trauma of my first marriage. I have now been remarried, and actually I will go ahead and share my screen so you can see my slides. That would probably be a good thing. Hold on a second. Where is Zoom? Okay. I apologize. I did not start sharing before I started talking. All right, we'll do this again. I'm going to start the slideshow from the beginning, and then I will share my screen. All right, here we go. Okay, so we already talked about the agenda and what was going to happen today. And we talked about what the masterclass was going to be about. And okay, so I was introducing myself. I got divorced from a 17-year marriage. I have been happily remarried for 2 years now. I spent 20 years working in the IT industry prior to becoming a certified life and trauma coach. And then I really put my focus into working with divorced women. There just wasn't a lot of resources for working with men who were divorced. And we kind of have like a unique take on what's going on in our lives. It's really unique when you come out of a long-term marriage and you have to kind of rediscover yourself. You have to heal. You have to rediscover your identity and what you want in life, and then build this whole new relationship kind of from a different perspective, right? From a different spot than someone in their teens or in their 20s who are building a relationship for the first time. So that's a little bit about me. I want to welcome all of you. I'm really glad that you are here today. Feel free to use the chat to ask questions. If you ask the questions as I go, I may not answer them as I go, but I will for sure come back and scroll through the entire chat and answer any questions that you have. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. How to know when he's the one. And the skill that I'm teaching here today is how to evaluate the men you date so that you never choose wrong again. And really, this is so important for those of us who've been divorced. Like, it's bad enough having one bad marriage. The last thing you want is to be in another one, right? The last thing you want is to commit to someone who isn't right for you. The last thing you want is to go through the experience you had before again. Like, that's really painful. And this has happened. I talked to a woman about a year ago who had been a widow, and then she had, gotten married. She'd been a widow, and then she'd gotten married and then divorced, and then gotten married again and then divorced. And like, this particular skill of choosing someone who would treat her well is kind of what was missing in her life. So I think this is so, so critical. I teach this to my clients who are working with me, but now I want to teach it to those of you who are thinking about dating, who are like just starting your journey, so that you can have the confidence that you'll be able to do it right when you start dating as well. So too many women cannot tell when they meet a man if he's right for them. Right. And so a lot of women tell me, well, I don't know what questions to ask. I don't know how to tell. I don't know, what are the signs of a narcissist? What are the red flags? What should I be looking for? And often, because they don't know, they often settle for someone who isn't right for them. It's kind of like the brain has like this resistance to doing all this work. So it just kind of settles. Or they don't settle, but then they find themselves dating a man for like 3 months and then having to break up because he wasn't the right one, and dating another guy for another 3 months and then breaking up because he wasn't the right one. And then they keep committing and finding out only down the line, sometimes 3 months down the line, sometimes 6 months down the line. I have a friend, not a client. I would love to say that this doesn't happen with my clients. So who recently broke up with someone that she had been dating for years. He turned out not to be the one for a myriad of reasons, right? And so if this kind of work is done up front, you won't find yourself like having to break up after 2 years or after 3 years. If I had done this kind of work before I married my first husband, I would probably never have married him. I would not have had to go through a divorce. So often women commit to a man only to find out that he wasn't compatible. He just wanted sex, he was cheating. All the stories, like you guys, I know you guys know all the stories. You find out he's a narcissist, he was never in love, or just had all these toxic traits, or just wasn't a good fit. So many things that can come up down the line. This particular skill of evaluation teaches you how to see all of that early on. Sometimes women also will get attached too early, right? And then you get your heart broken, and then you have to go through the healing of, the loneliness, the eating the ice cream out of the bucket, having your girlfriends come to comfort you because you got attached too early, right? You fell in love when it wasn't time to fall in love yet. And then that constant feeling of being betrayed, disappointed, burned out really makes a lot of people quit the dating scene. They're like, I'm done. It's all games. It's all horrible. And then they quit. And what happens when you quit? Then you don't find the right one, right? So we want to be able to keep you in the game until you find the person that's the right one for you. So why does this happen? Like, why is this cycle of like dating and breaking up or getting ghosted or being cheated on? Why is this happening over and over again? So I'm going to kind of break it down from the psychology of it. And hopefully that really gives you some insight into how your brain works and what you need to do to take control of your brain and your dating process. So what happens is that your brain wants to move away from discomfort. It doesn't like things that are uncomfortable, right? It wants to move towards pleasure. We all know this. If I offered you a carrot and I offered you a bar of chocolate, you might take the carrot, but your brain would be telling you, go for the chocolate, right? Go for the chocolate because that's pleasurable. So it wants to move towards what feels good, even if that's not what's good for you. And then it wants to move away from discomfort. Your brain also wants to avoid effort. This is why we procrastinate. This is why we want to sleep in. It's because we're biologically wired not to exert a lot of effort. And this really came as an adaptation when food was scarce. So hundreds, thousands of years ago, when we didn't have a lot of food, your body would like conserve calories by reducing effort. Because you didn't know when your next meal was going to come. Well, now that's different. But your brain is still wired the same way to avoid effort. And finally, your brain is also wired to seek social acceptance. It wants to be accepted by any human that's in your area. So if there's a person around you, your brain wants that person to accept you. It wants that person to approve of you. And this is because back thousands of years ago, we lived in tribes. And nobody could survive on their own. We had to survive in groups because otherwise the wild animal would get you. There was no one to help you hunt for food. And so it was a survival mechanism to be socially acceptable to our tribe. Well, now we don't really need to be socially acceptable to our tribe to be safe, but the brain still thinks you have to be. So when you're dating people, your brain is wired to want that person's approval. Your brain is wired to want that person's acceptance. And this causes all the things we listed before, where you start to go through this process of dating in a way that keeps you getting heartbroken over and over again. All of this is the brain's default design to live from fear. It really just wants to live from a safe, it's afraid it's going to have some discomfort. It's afraid it won't get pleasure. And so it gives you all of these responses, and I'll break them down in a minute. It breaks all these things down it responds in such a way as to keep you safe, right, from pain. But a lot of times that works against you on the dating scene. So let's go a little bit deeper. How does this play out, right? When the brain is acting from fear and it wants to go towards pleasure and away from pain and avoid discomfort and be socially accepted so it can be in the tribe, what does your brain do? Well, the first thing it doesn't want to think critically about the person that you're with. When you're dating, your brain does not want to do the hard work of trying to figure the guy out. Your brain either wants to say yes right away, or it wants to say no right away. It does not want to do the hard work of thinking critically. So even if you want to think critically, your brain is working against you in that scenario. Think about how many times you have a project and you leave it until the last minute, right? We've all done this. This is because our brain is wired to convince us not to make the effort to do something. So when you're dating, you have to understand how your brain works. Your brain wants to avoid effort when it comes to dating. Secondly, your brain wants to avoid discomfort. So it doesn't want to ask uncomfortable questions. This also ties in with social acceptance. Your brain doesn't want to ask the guy, hey, do you use porn? Whoops. That's kind of like, oh, awkward, right? Your brain doesn't want to ask that question. Your brain does not want to feel the awkwardness. It doesn't want to have difficult conversations. It doesn't want to say, hey, what is your financial life look like? Are you in debt? It doesn't want to ask all of those questions, right? And so this is why you sometimes you look at someone and you're like, you're smart, you're successful, you're brilliant, you do such a great job. How did you find yourself with this guy? It's because of your lower brain. Your fear brain was in control. And this is everything that it was doing while you were dating that guy. Like when I think about my first marriage, oh my gosh, all of this was totally me, right? I wasn't thinking critically about compatibility. I had like 3 points. My ex-husband met those 3 points, boom, boom, boom. I was like, done, right? I didn't want to ask uncomfortable questions. I didn't want to question him when he did certain things because that would have been awkward and I didn't want to feel that discomfort. Now, your brain also wants to move towards pleasure. So it wants to attach quickly to a promising prospect. If a guy seems to be rich, if he's taking you on this romantic date, your brain is like, oh, this is great. This is pleasurable, right? If there's a lot of physical chemistry, your brain is like, oh, this feels so good. Let's go ahead with it without going through all this effort of asking questions. Your brain moves you towards that pleasure. And then finally, on social acceptance, your brain wants to people please when it's around the guy. It wants to do whatever he wants because then you'll have approval. Then you'll have acceptance, right? And so you might start to people please. You might start to commit when you're not ready to commit because the guy wants you to commit right away, or he moves very quickly. He's very direct and very aggressive and wants you to give him your phone number and wants to meet up with you right away. And because you're seeking social acceptance, you don't want to question him. You decide to do whatever it is he wants. These are like the high level of what your brain is doing. And so if any of this applies to you, if you can recognize your brain here, you can start to see why you need a different process for managing the way your brain behaves when you're dating. You can't just go out there in a default way and just be like, I'm just going to take my regular old brain and date. You have to train it to be kind of like to keep you safe and to stay within your process, to stay on track with what you're looking for throughout the dating process, throughout all of the temptations. You have to kind of train your brain to do what you want it to do. You have to use your prefrontal cortex, which is your more highly evolved brain, to run the process of dating. You can't let your lower brain, the lizard brain, the fear brain, you can't let it run the process. So finally, on how this plays out, I had said I was going to show you the kinds of things that you're doing when you think you're evaluating that may not be working for you. When your lower brain is in charge, these are the things you're probably doing even when you're trying to evaluate. So some people will go on the attack. They'll assume an attack. And this is because the lower brain is like thinking, well, all men are awful, right? It's like, well, if I'm going to evaluate, then I'm going to assume that all men are awful and they're all narcissists and they're all jerks. So you project and generalize. You just assume. It's still not critical thinking. Critical thinking is like kind of in the middle. When your brain doesn't want to do the work of critical thinking, it will either completely avoid the process of evaluation, or it'll assume that the guy is bad and just go the other way. Either way, it's not making any effort to do the critical thinking. So assume an attack is one way, and some people are like, well, yeah, this guy's no good and that guy's no good, and they feel like no guy is any good. That's the other extreme. Some women will avoid completely, right? They don't evaluate at all. They just stay in their heads, overthinking, being confused. I don't know if he's the one. I don't know if he's not the one, but they're not evaluating. They're not asking questions and going through the process of actually figuring the guy out. It's kind of like a teacher, like you say you have a math teacher and she never gives a test. And she's just always trying to figure out in her brain which of her students knows the material, but never wants to give a test. That's kind of what the avoidant is like. Now, number 3 is like the teacher who gives the student all the answers. Now, this one is kind of interesting. I see this a lot and people are not very aware of it. These are women who are really you're really trying to actually evaluate. You ask questions, but then you also give the guy the answer you want to hear. I'll give you an example. A lady might be on an app and she's texting with a guy and maybe he doesn't respond for like 3 days, right? So the question there is this person interested in me? Is he attentive? Is he responsive, right? You're evaluating his responsiveness to you, his attentiveness, his communication skills. So the guy disappears for 3 days, comes back and starts texting you again without even saying, hey, I'm really sorry, this happened. What a lot of women will do at that point is to try to fix the guy. And they'll say, well, you really should have let me know if you weren't going to be around. I actually prefer my guys to communicate a lot. And they'll teach him how to communicate with them. That's giving him the answer. What has actually happened already is the guy has you should already have evaluated him for responsiveness. He's already gotten a 0 on the test of responsiveness, right? And so it's a very subtle blind spot, but when you give the guy the answers and you're teaching him and you're trying to like help him get better, you're believing in his potential, at some point you'll end up falling for him and committing to a guy who already was evident that he was not a fit for you. Now, number 4 is you might want to adjust to who he is. This happens with the guys who have maybe a more forceful personality, or they're stronger, or they have like the things that they want. And so instead of saying, hey, well, this is what I want, and I'll talk a little bit more about that specific process, and going through with what you want, evaluating him for what you want, you might be spending a lot of time thinking about what he wants and trying to figure out how to give him what he wants, how to show up for him, how to be nice, how to listen, how to be, you keep giving and giving and giving and trying to be the person so that he will pick you. You tolerate things that maybe you don't want because you don't want to talk about it. You push through, well, this relationship is work, I'm just going to keep doing the work. Or you change yourself to fit what he is or who he says he wants. Like an example is, and this happens frequently, I'll have a client who will say, well, I don't really want to go exclusive with someone earlier than maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. Every client chooses their own timeline. And then they meet a guy who wants to go exclusive after 2 weeks, right? And instead of doing the awkward, uncomfortable thing of saying, I'm not going exclusive for this time, they adjust their timeline to fit his. And when you do that, you lose the opportunity to evaluate him for patience or for boundaries or for respect or for how well he sees you. And then finally, the last evaluation technique that doesn't work is advocating for the guy. So I do talk to some women who will advocate for the man to themselves. Like they're always selling themselves on the man. I had a conversation with a woman who had met a guy and she really liked him. They'd gone on like maybe 2 or 3 dates. And he had actually disclosed to her that he had a battery and assault charge on his record. And so she was like, oh, he was so honest about it. And he came to me and he told me about it. And it really wasn't that bad. His wife did this and that and all of those things. So now she has forgotten what she wanted and is now advocating for this man who had a battery and assault charge on his record and is now kind of like selling herself on it instead of going back to what she really wanted and saying, is this what I want, right? So these are some evaluation techniques that don't work. They're not like ones or zeros, but you can kind of see how the brain does this to either get you to commit to a man so that you can be attached and you can have pleasure of being in a relationship, or to avoid the discomfort of being in an awkward conversation or a difficult conversation, to seek social acceptance with that person by people pleasing, or to, what was the fourth one? I forgot what the fourth one is, but these are all the ways that your brain is doing things that will actually work against you, even when you think you are evaluating the man appropriately. So what I teach my clients is a concept that I call how to get to the truth. And I have kind of summarized it in like 3 steps that you need to follow to be able to get to the truth of any person. And you can keep using those steps over and over and over again with any guy that you meet so that you can get to the truth before you commit. And you can really sit with your brain, especially when you can tell what your brain is doing, and you can adjust and use your prefrontal cortex, your higher brain, to kind of keep your brain on track. All right, so Tanya says she has to leave. Oh, I'm sorry, Tanya, that's totally fine. Well, maybe if you have a few minutes, we can get to the truth right away. All right, how to get to the truth. All right, so step 1 is to know exactly who you want. This is so critical. Nothing else works in the evaluation process if you don't know exactly who you are looking for when you are dating. Like when I work with my clients, we do a deep dive into this. We're constantly tweaking their vision of who they are looking for, because basically that becomes the map, right? And then they say no to everyone else. And my job as the coach is to help them keep them accountable to that map of what they said their vision was, that we developed this whole vision, and I keep them accountable to it, and I help them continue to evaluate every person they meet, so that when they do choose someone, they're choosing someone at the very highest level. They're choosing the very best person. So that's step 1, is to know exactly who you want. Have a clear vision of what you are looking for. Whenever you're going on a road trip, you always have a map so that you can get to your destination. Otherwise, you could stop anywhere and you would think that was your destination, but it wouldn't be your destination, right? So you have to be super clear about what you want, right? Be super clear about what you want. And I just want to throw the question out there, put this in the chat. How clear are you on a scale of 1 to 10 right now? How clear are you on what you are looking for in a man? So if you are dating or thinking about dating, please put in the chat, how clear are you? How well do you know what you're looking for? Have you really done that work to figure out what you're looking for? All right, so that's step 1. Be super clear about what you're looking for. So Heather says a 6. That's pretty good. Anyone else? Holly's a 3. So definitely some work there. All right, step 2 is the evaluation. So you have exactly what you're looking for. Erica says, I think a 9. I made a long list of character requirements. Awesome. Really good. Really good. All right. So step 2 is to then evaluate every man you meet to see if he matches your vision. So you've got that. So like for Erica, you've got that list of requirements. Now you need to evaluate every man that you meet against that. Like this isn't something you just write and you tuck away in the drawer. Like you have to say, every time you go on a date with a guy, and actually with my clients, we start the evaluation process right from texting. Right from the moment they're sending texts, we're looking for the characteristics of those guys so that they can weed out the ones that don't match their vision right from texting, so that you don't even have to waste any time going on a date if the person already shows that he's not that person. So you evaluate everyone you meet with your list. This is the key. That's why that list is so critical. You observe the person, right? Some women, like I said, will give him the answer. So they'll be like, okay, are you financially stable? They ask, are you financially stable? He says yes. And then they go back to their list and they check, he's financially stable. Doesn't quite work that way, right? He can say he's financially stable, but then you have to observe, right? Does he own his own car? Or are you giving him rides everywhere? Does he have his own place? Does he pay his rent? Does he pay his bills, right? You have to test his answers. And of course, not in an obnoxious way. Sometimes it takes time to get all of the answers. And if you get an answer that's a check, Then you start to evaluate again in another area. So all of the things that you want in that person, you will observe, you will ask questions, you will test the answers that he gives you, and then you go on and evaluate in another area, right? And so with my clients, we work on like relationship gates where we move men through from one stage to another. And at every stage, the man has to pass all the tests that a client has for that stage to move to the next stage. So they either drop off or they move to the next stage. All right, so step one was have your list, know who you're looking for. Step two is to evaluate. You do that by observing, by asking questions, testing his answers, and evaluating again. And then step three is the decision. This is the other thing that people don't do. They don't make a decision. And if you don't make a decision, the decision gets made for you. So you might be with a guy who wants to be with you, but maybe he's not good for you. And you're hoping that he will break up with you. You're hoping that he will leave. Or you're overthinking whether or not you should break up with him. And this can go on for months. You really don't want it to go on for months. Like if you did one guy for 3 months and he turns out not to be the guy, that means a whole year you only date 4 people. And you might need to meet way more people to find the one. So you don't want the guys who are not right for you tying up your time. You don't want them to tie up your time only to find out that they weren't the one. You have to make the decision. This is one of the areas where my clients get a lot of support and training and teaching from me is on making that decision every single time. So the steps to making the decision, there are 2 steps. One is decide, and I'll tell you how in a second. And the second is follow through. Every decision, for it to truly be a decision, requires an action that you're going to take to put that decision in motion. Right? So the easiest one is the first column, which is when a guy is a no. You're like, oh, for sure, this is a no. He might be a nice guy, but maybe you're not physically attracted to him. Or he might be a nice guy, but maybe his kids are too young and you're older and you want someone whose kids are already grown. Or maybe he lives 3 hours away and is not willing to move and you're not willing to move. Like anything that's a deal breaker on your list, you need to know that the guy is a no. So these are usually pretty easy to tell right away if a guy is a no. If a guy is a no, move on. Tell him clearly, gently, firmly that it's over. This is where so many women get stuck. You know deep down that a guy is a no. You decide he's a no, but then you don't take the action. You don't move on quickly. Why don't you move on quickly? Because your brain doesn't want the discomfort of breaking up. Your brain wants the pleasure of having someone around you who's, this is better than nothing. Your brain wants to avoid the effort of having to go out and look for someone else again. Your brain wants the social acceptance of having a boyfriend. All of those things. Your lizard brain is doing is running the show. That will never get you the relationship that you want. So if the decision is a no based on your list, you want to move on quickly. Now, the next category are the people where it's like, well, I don't know yet. All of these things check out, but these other things haven't checked out. So if the decision is, I don't know yet, your action is to do more evaluations on the areas where you don't know. Now, this can be a very sneaky decision because a lot of women will say, well, I don't know yet. But then they don't ask themselves, what don't I know? What is the specific thing that you don't know that's keeping you from making him a yes or a no? So I don't know yet doesn't mean you just hang around him. It doesn't mean you overthink or obsess or, question yourself or self-doubt or just stay stuck. I don't know yet means, I have these 5 questions that I haven't asked and I want to ask, or I haven't met his family yet, so I'm not sure. And then you take the action of evaluating by saying, hey, I need to meet your family. And you put that action into motion, right? So the I don't know yet can be super sneaky. I don't know yet is not a passive place. It's a very active place where you're actively thinking and taking action to find the answers. Like I said, this is called getting to the truth. Now, the last category is hopefully your fun, exciting category is when the person is a yes. You have your list of requirements. He's met all of them. You've tested, you've observed. Go ahead and commit, right? Go ahead and say the yes and move on with that person. And so you only have these 3 buckets. There are no other buckets for this decision. There are no other buckets for any guy. So if you're thinking of guys that you know, right? For those of you who are currently dating, if you are dating, or there's someone you're thinking about as we're walking through this, let me know if he's a no, if he's a yes, or if he's an I don't know yet, right? Like just pop it in the chat if you can put the guy that you're dating or the guys you're thinking about in one of these categories. There are no other categories. You either know he's a no, or you know that he's a yes, or you're like, I don't know. And I don't know because I don't have answers to these specific questions, right? So once you go through the step of making the decision, you have to remember your brain doesn't want you to do this because decisions require action. You can't procrastinate. You can't stay stuck on the couch just doing Netflix and chill. You got to, go for it and keep moving on your dating search so that you can meet the man that you really, really want. And so as you do this, I want you to remember, you have to move your brain to decision and action because it wants to move away from discomfort. It wants to move towards pleasure. It wants to avoid effort and it wants to seek social acceptance. Now, how do you move your brain into decision and action? And there's so many tools that as a coach I use for this. I'm going to teach you one of them today. When you find your brain starting to spin, starting to be like, oh, I don't know. It's so scary. I don't want to let him go. He's so nice. I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be selfish. I'm not sure what to do. I don't know how to say all those things. Your brain will give you so many things. What you want to do in this situation is talk to your future self. This is a technique that is so powerful because where you are now is your single you. You're single and your brain has all this drama going on. That's where you are today. Where you're trying to get to and where I work as a coach to get my clients to is you want to get to your married you. You want to get to your married self. You want to get to the person who's got it going on, right? Now, your married self knows the guy that you married, right? She's in the future and she's like, listen, we get the good guy. We get the handsome guy. He's active and he's fun and he makes us laugh and he brings us coffee in the morning and he rubs our feet and he gives us space. He helps with the kids. He's like, when we have problems, we sit and we talk to them together, et cetera, like all of those things. Your married you knows that, right? Okay, so Holly says she's thinking about Dan and he's an I don't know. Ryan is an I don't know. And I'll come to your question at the end. But your married you is in the future, right? That's the vision. That's where you're going. Right now, your single you is kind of like going around in circles. And one of the techniques that's really good for moving you forward is to talk to the married you. So the single you might meet a guy who still chats with his ex every once in a while, right? Like his phone is always going off. They're like, where are people? Are like, what's going on? And the single you is like, well, maybe it's okay that he still chats with his ex, right? I don't want to be that girl who is jealous, right? So it's okay. Or your single you is like, well, we're always arguing and fighting, but I guess it's okay for us to keep working at it. Single you says, well, he says he's willing to learn how to whatever the thing is, or I don't want to hurt his feelings by breaking up or by bringing up this conversation. I don't want to ask awkward questions. He's not responding to me because he's just busy. Single you is like going around in these circles, committing to men and tolerating men who are not exactly what you are looking for, right? But married you is like, listen, we found a guy. He's amazing, right? I love telling our love story. Now, I love telling our love story because that would be the married you talking to maybe the lady I was, coaching, who said, well, he's got a battery assault and it's fine. Yeah, is that really the love story you want? It's like, no, married you is like, no, we don't have that love story, right? We have a love story that involves a great proposal and his family is there and my family is there. Like, it's kind of like you create this vision that's like really beautiful. That's what you want. It doesn't have to be like grandiose, but it's like, this is what I really want. Single you is thinking, well, we fight a lot, but it's okay to work at it. Married you is like, no, being with the person we marry is so effortless. And married you reminds you why you have this list of the kind of relationship that you want, so that you can evaluate every guy you meet for marriage or for a long-term relationship instead of evaluating him for right now. So a guy might be fine for like going to a coffee shop or like going to the movies, but is he really fine for being married for the rest of your life? And I know if you guys have been following me for a while, I told this story about a guy that I was dating for about a month. I really liked him and things were going really well. And then one day we had this conversation about the fact that we're getting older, at some point somebody's going to get sick, right, and need care, which interestingly happened to me last year. I went in for surgery and my now husband actually had to take my daughter off to college because I couldn't take her because I was all cut up and on pain meds, right? And it was just such a blessing that he was able to do that and I could trust him with my daughter. Now, this other guy, Sean was his name. I said, hey, what's your philosophy on like taking care of your spouse as you get older? And he was like, oh yeah, I'm not into that. I'm not like a really touchy-feely person. Like I'll help with money, but I'm not really good with sick people. I broke up with him that night. I was like, oh, that's a no, right? Because I talked to married me now who said, no, our husband is like super nurturing. He's very loving and he cares for us and he helps take care of us. So this technique is just really good for keeping yourself on track and for helping you move yourself into your future self so that you're evaluating based on where you want to be, not just what's in front of you. All right. So thank you. That's the end of the technique on evaluating. I'm going to do questions and answers in just a minute. But before I jump into the Q&A, so go ahead. There's a question from Holly. If anyone else has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box or the Q&A. I think there's a Q&A box too. Okay, so there's no questions in the Q&A. Yeah, everything I see is in the chat box. So I see one question in the chat box. And I'm going to tell you about my program real quick for those of you who may not be familiar with my program. And then we'll do the questions and answers. So real quick, there we go. My program is called the Dating After Divorce Academy. It's a life transforming community for divorced women who want to do it right this time. And it's really based on my training as a life and relationship coach, as well as my story. Like I said, I did the dating thing too. I actually met my husband online. So everything that I teach, I have had to go through it. And I know that this process works for staying on track and choosing right and really creating the relationship that you want. It is simple, but it's not necessarily easy, which is why you might want some support. You might want my support to go through the process and maybe the support of other women. So I'm building this community of women we meet together once a week on Wednesday. And Wednesday evenings, actually we met just before this call. The meeting was just before this call. And we do this coaching, like I give you all the modules. I currently have 10 modules in the program that I walk my clients through, from your ideal partner deep dive. We go deep. We make a list that is realistic. It's extensive, but it's realistic. It's not like you're looking for a movie star or anything like that. All the way from what you want, how to find the person, where to find the person, how to get there. We do an offline strategy for dating, an online strategy for your dating. I go deep into this evaluation process. We'll have like other worksheets that we do this evaluation process on until you meet the one. And then it doesn't stop there. When you actually meet the person, there's healing that sometimes has to happen. Like sometimes being in a relationship with someone again can actually trigger things from a divorce. So we actually work on that trauma. We work on nurturing the commitment with the person. We work on your relationship milestones, like while you're dating, as you plan towards commitment. What are the things that need to happen in order to keep you on track towards commitment? So those are the modules that we go through: how to create fun and flirty dates, how to not be awkward on your dates. If you're having trouble putting yourself back out there, I coach you on all of that because I have been through it and have worked with so many women in my one-on-one practice to do the same thing. So pretty much I kind of have it down. Actually, last week, I had another client who kind of said, I think this is the guy. And so now we're working on nurturing commitment. And she worked with me for several months to get to that point of eventually meeting the guy. And what was amazing was that there was one guy she was dating and she dated him for about 2 months. And she actually wanted to break up with him a month before. And she just had such a hard time breaking up with him. But when she finally broke up with him, the real guy showed up. So that was one of the inspirations for this webinar, was that I thought this is so important for women to know. The program is a lifetime program. Once you join, you continue working with me until, it doesn't matter how long it takes you. If it takes you 6 months, if it takes you a year, for as long as you need support in your relationship, even after you're married, you're more, the coaching can continue if there are issues that you want to address in your marriage. It's a lifetime program because I am in this work for a lifetime. So it's a lifetime program. You go through all the stages of healing, dating, and getting married again. You get immediate access to the modules and worksheets. We have the weekly call that I talked about. We only have a couple of women in there right now, so the Facebook community hasn't started. But once we have a larger group, we'll start the Facebook community, which means this is the perfect time to join this group because it's still kind of small, right? So you're going to get a lot of one-on-one attention if you join right now. You can create friendships with other women who are in this program. And of course, I'm always adding new classes and teaching videos on an ongoing basis. So the program is $2,500. It's one payment. And then you get access to me as your coach and to the program for as long as you need it. So this is the group program. And if you prefer one-on-one coaching, you can reach out to me and we can talk about what one-on-one coaching with me looks like. This is the URL to schedule a call directly with me. And if you want to join the group, the academy, you can also book a call with me if you have questions. It's just shadecurry.com/schedule-appointment. So feel free to book a call. I give everyone who wants it one free hour of a consultation or strategy call. So yeah, feel free to book that. But you can decide if you want to work in the group or if you want to work with me one-on-one, and we can talk about that on the call. All right, let us go to Q&A. All right, so Holly's question was, my question is, if I create a list of what I want, I'm worried it will seem like I am looking for perfection. I am not perfect, and I'm not looking for a perfect person. Right, and I totally get that. And this would be kind of like, it's different for each person. And I get what you mean by looking for perfection. It's one of the reasons why I tend not to work with women in their 20s, because they tend to really be looking for perfection. And my program is really designed to be working with women who are well-grounded, who are like, I know what real life looks like. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not looking for the six-pack abs, right? However, there is a spectrum where you're not looking for perfection, but then are you settling for less than what's compatible with you? That is the other thing. So that's kind of where the coaching could help you, is you don't want to go for perfection because that's unrealistic, but then you also don't want to settle for less than what would make you happy. And that's really where knowing yourself and really digging deep into yourself and really digging deep into what you want. You might have to do some self-discovery work, especially if you were married for a long time and you're not sure what you want, you're not sure what you like. Maybe you haven't dated a lot. You might have to do some work there to create a list that is actually realistic. The other thing to think about is, have you experienced a lot of healthy relationships? Like, was your dad a healthy dad, brothers, sisters, things like that? If you haven't experienced a lot of healthy relationships, if you had like more toxic relationships with men overall, whether they were your husband or not, you might be prone to settling too much. So you might have that in there. So which is another thing that you kind of have to think about and maybe get coaching on is, have you completely healed from settling from toxic relationships? Because a lot of what women do is they feel like they're asking for too much. Feel like you don't have permission to ask for what you really want or for what will really make you happy. That can really hold you back and make you settle for the wrong person. So you do need a list, right? And you need a list that you're sure will make you happy, even if the person isn't perfect. So what does that look like? What does it look like for you to have a person who is good for you, who's healthy, who's loving, but who isn't necessarily perfect? What are the flaws that you're willing to tolerate? Right? So sometimes people say, well, I'm looking for a perfect person, and then they tolerate abuse, right? You want to only tolerate healthy flaws, so to speak. All right. Next question. What do you think the appropriate time frame to wait for sex? And do you think having sex during the evaluation phase is okay? I feel like that seems to be on the table very quickly in my dating process. I don't feel like it's bad, but I'm not sure it's helping to get to the right one. Yes, 100%. So one of the things, like I mentioned before, is that I help my clients design their relationship gate. So it's different for every client. So to answer the first question, the appropriate time frame to wait for sex is different for every client. But I always make my clients define it ahead of time. It's part of defining who you want, right? What is your appropriate time frame? What are you comfortable with? Some people, it's like 6 weeks. Some people, it's 8 weeks. Some people, it's married after we get married, right? Like there's a whole wide time frame. So this may be part of the self-discovery that you need to do is, what do I really want? Right? And it sounds like you said, it seems to be on the table very quickly in my dating process, which makes me think that you are one of those people who maybe is adjusting. You're doing a lot of adjusting to the people that you are meeting, and you're not evaluating based on what you want. So you get to define what that time frame is. But what I encourage my clients to do is to define it, write it down. This is the appropriate time frame that I want. I'm just going to throw this out there, 6 weeks or 8 weeks. 8 weeks is the appropriate time frame for me. Now, the next step is to then define the evaluation. What do I need to know before I go to this with this person? That's the evaluation. So you may not be thinking about, what do you need to know about a person before sex gets on the table? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever said, here are the questions I need to ask. Here's where we need to be in the relationship. Like maybe we need to be committed together. We need to be exclusive. Maybe I need to have met his family. Maybe he needs to have met my friends. Like, what are all of your requirements before that happens? This is the observe, evaluate before moving to the next stage. So my clients and I, we go deep into this. They always have that always set up ahead of time, right? And so when they're evaluating, they know what they need to evaluate before sex happens. They know what they need to evaluate before they become exclusive. They know what they need to evaluate before they get engaged. They know we actually go like really granular. We evaluate certain things before you go from texting to a call. That's how detailed it is, so that it's always very clear. There's never any confusion. If the guy doesn't meet all this criteria, he never gets a phone call. And then when you're talking on the phone, you're looking for another set of criteria, right? And then if he doesn't meet that criteria, like at every point in time that you get to a no, you drop him early. This is where you're able to then drop those guys very early in the process so that you're not wasting a lot of time. All right, I feel like that seems to be on the table very quickly, my dating process. Yeah, because you're adjusting to those guys. And I don't feel like it's bad, but I'm not sure it's helping to get to the right one. Correct. It's not helping to get to the right one because you're not in charge of your process. You're letting the people you meet be in charge. You get to be in charge when you define everything ahead of time. You know how you're going to handle it, and you're not letting your brain move you to avoid, right? Or to advocate for the guy, or to avoid the uncomfortable discussion, or move towards the pleasure. So sex would be an area where your brain might move you quickly towards pleasure, because that's just what the brain wants. It doesn't care if you're happy. It doesn't care if you get married. It doesn't care if you find someone healthy. It just wants pleasure. It's like, this is pleasure. Let's do it, right? You have to start using your own prefrontal cortex to set the tone and to make those decisions ahead of time, and don't just let your brain take over. All right, next question. When you have to break up, how do you keep your decision made and not go back into the comfort of the person? Oh my gosh, Heather, for sure, it is like taking charge of your brain. It's the same answer. Yeah, because your brain, this is what your brain does. Your brain is like, listen, we had a guy. We didn't like him very much, but at least we could cuddle with him. Like, we could go to the movies and he would hold our hand. He was a jerk, but at least we weren't alone. So your brain thinks being with a jerk is more pleasurable than being alone. So it starts to like give you a lot of like urges to go back to the person. This is where coaching your brain is so helpful. Some of the things you need to learn in order to keep to your decision is how to manage your emotions, how to process the emotions. When you break up with someone, you're going to have a lot of emotions come up. You're going to have a lot of emotions. You're going to feel rejected, or you might feel lonely. You might feel sad. You might feel some grief because there was a loss. You might feel some disappointment. And your brain, when all these negative emotions come up, your brain is like, something bad has happened. Let us fix it immediately by going back to the guy. However, if you are getting coached, you can learn how to manage those emotions, how to allow them to just kind of move through you and dissipate and heal them, so that you don't allow those emotions to move you into a bad decision. Does that make sense? Like, processing emotions is a skill that you have to learn. It's not something that we were taught. It should really be taught in high schools, or actually in grade school, right? How to allow emotions, how to know that even though you're feeling a negative emotion in your body, it doesn't mean the world is going to end. It just means that something's happened and you're processing it, and you just need to process it until it's over. And these are some of the skills that, I can teach you in this program, where you learn how to handle your emotions, grieve, and move through it, and have that accountability, because you've got that, your list of requirements, and because you have an evaluation, you can then engage your like logical brain, your prefrontal cortex, to make the decision and kind of like stay in that place and start to generate positive emotions about the future that you're going to have, because you're not with this person. So really teaching your brain to use the right perspective on the situation. So when your lower brain is in charge, it uses the perspective of, we're alone, let's go back to the person. But when you use your prefrontal cortex, you can actually do the technique of talking to your married self, and your prefrontal cortex can be like, no, this is really great that we broke up with this jerk, because now we can move towards a good guy. All right. Holly, I'm naturally attracted to men outside of my race. It's okay. Of course. Of course. I don't know if you're divorced, but I'm like, listen, the whole point of being divorced is that we get to do whatever we want. Like, what's the point of being divorced if you still have to follow someone else's rules? Yeah, it can totally be on your list. It's just what you're attracted to all your life. Yeah, 100%. Really get in touch with what you want, right? You're not in a relationship to please the world. You're in a relationship for your own companionship, someone that you want to be with. And if you're following the law of the land, you only get one, right? You only get that one person, at least one person at a time, right? But hopefully you get the one that you want to be with forever. So settling for less than what you want, whatever that is, isn't going to be helpful. Like what's the point of you get one spot and then you don't put the right person in that spot. So if you are naturally attracted to men outside of your race, then put that on your list and date men outside of your race. Totally fine. Totally fine. All right. Those are all of the questions. Thank you all for your participation. This was amazing. There will be a replay. So this is being recorded. Yes, it is. I had to double check. It is being recorded. So it's going to be processed tonight and it will go out by email tomorrow. So if you kind of want to review parts of it, you can take a look at it. I want to encourage all of you to join the program. Everything you've asked here, like if you want to take this to the next level and really implement it and really get to, follow that process with support all the way through so that you use the process appropriately and it works for you, 100%, this is what you're going to get in the program. If you have questions, book an appointment with me. We can talk about it, see kind of where you're at and what would be best for you. And then we'll go from there. So I appreciate your time and attention. I will see you all either on the podcast or on Facebook, which is where I hang out, or on the next webinar. Take care.